All right, good afternoon to all of you. If you can hear me, I would ask you to wave. Excellent, excellent. Bill, nice to see you. Let's get this show. Let's get this show going. Early this morning, the Secretary General addressed virtually the leaders' dialogue on the African COVID climate emergency convened by the African Development Bank and the Global Center for Adaptation. In his remarks, he said that the world confronts a pandemic, a recession, and a climate crisis. At the United Nations conference, COP26 in November, provides a compelling opportunity for Africa to turn ambition into reality. He reiterated the 5 actions needed for a breakthrough on adaptation, which include increased funding from G7 members and the integrating climate risk policies into investment decisions. African countries continue to contribute little to global emissions, he said, yet Africa is on the front lines of dramatic climate impacts, from floods to cyclones and to drought that can wipe out decades of development gains just overnight. He also encouraged all international partners to come forward with pledges to support the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. And once again, Mr. Guterres urged countries to align their COVID-19 recovery packages with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. And lastly, he reiterated the UN's commitment to working with African governments to secure the support they need to chart prosperous and a sustainable future. For her part, and those remarks were distributed to you earlier. For her parts, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, spoke at the consultation of Ministers of Education of the E9 Digital Learning Initiative in a session entitled Scaling Up Digital Learning to Accelerate Progress Towards SDG 4. And if you're like me wondering who the E9 are, they are Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Nigeria, and Pakistan. This initiative focuses on supporting teachers, investing in skills, and the narrowing digital divide, which are 3 of the 5 priorities of the Global 2020 Education Meeting Declaration. In her remarks, Ms. Mohammed noted that before COVID-19, access to quality education was already profoundly unequal, financing gaps were immense, and learning was not equipping young people with the skills needed to excel in today's world. She said, as we look to the future, it is clear that there is no going back to the education we had before the emergency. The Deputy Secretary General stressed that if we are to realize the ambition of SDG 4, then we need to pursue pandemic recovery efforts that transforms education. And on Myanmar, our colleagues on the ground today say they remain deeply concerned about the impact of the continuing violence the impact that the continuing violence is having on the country's health and education system. Since the 1st of February, there have been at least 28 attacks against hospitals and health personnel and 7 attacks against schools and school personnel. Health volunteers are attacked, and attacks against ambulances are preventing life-saving help from reaching civilians wounded by security forces. And a quick update from Mali. Our colleagues on the ground tell us that the 34 peacekeepers wounded in Friday's attack continue to receive medical treatment. 9 of the 34 were evacuated to Dakar in Senegal, where they are currently being treated for serious injuries in hospital. And speaking at the Security Council this morning in a pre-scheduled meeting, the head of peacekeeping operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, said that Friday's attack on the mission camp in Mali was a reminder of the challenges facing the country and the broader Sahel region. This strategy, he added, is also an illustration of the bravery and determination of the UN peacekeepers to support the Malian population. The Chadian peacekeepers' heroic defense inflicted serious setback on the attackers, Mr. Lacroix said. He reiterated the Secretary General's call on all those concerned to scale up and strengthen the international community's response to the issue of terrorism and violent extremism in the Sahel region. He also called on Mali's transitional government to devise a comprehensive approach to improve the security situation. Turning to the country's political situation, Mr. Lacroix welcomed recent progress, but also called on all concerned to accelerate the pace of reforms. Any sustainable improvement of the security situation in Mali is predicated on no small part on the success of the current political transition. His remarks were shared with you. And from South Sudan, as you know, the Secretary General's Special Representative, David Shearer, will soon leave his position after 4 years in the country. He will be succeeded by Nicholas Haysom. Mr. Shearer expressed his admiration for the South Sudanese people whom he called tough, resilient, and remarkably patient. Mr. Shearer urged the people and the leaders of South Sudan to remain united and energized to push for the peace process forward, to fully implement the revitalized agreement and hold elections so that communities across South Sudan can finally enjoy true peace and prosperity. He noted that while important progress has been made, the peace process remains fragile, and there is still much to be done, including picking up the pace on constitution making, transitional justice, and economic reform. He said the courageous decisions need to be made to unify the armed forces on all sides. His statement was online. And from north of the border in Sudan, the Secretary General's Special Representative for the country, Volker Perthes, today welcomed the decision by the country's Security and Defense Council to declare a state of emergency to contain the situation in West Darfur. Our humanitarian colleagues said that 56 people were killed in recent clashes between the Masalit and Arab communities in West Darfur's capital, N'Djamena. In a statement, he urged government security forces to prevent further violence and restore order in the interest of all civilians. Mr. Perthes also called on the government to ensure the safety and access of humanitarian organizations providing services to all those affected and to investigate and hold accountable those responsible for violence. Due to the violence, the delivery of aid to West Darfur has been suspended and humanitarian flights have been canceled, preventing aid from reaching 700,000 human beings. Humanitarian partners have been providing food, health, sanitation, and protection to help to people in and around N'Djamena with available stocks. We and our partners are appealing for $1.9 billion to help 8.9 million vulnerable people in Sudan, including in Darfur, in 2021. To date, only 7% of the funding has been received. Moving on to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, according to our partners at the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program and their latest food security analysis for the DRC, 1 in 3 people is suffering from acute hunger. This means that an estimated 27.3 million people are affected by acute food insecurity, including nearly 7 million people grappling with emergency levels of acute hunger. This is a record high, the agency said, adding that the country is home to the highest number of people in urgent need of food security and assistance in the world. Conflict remains a key cause of hunger, but another factor, such as the impact of the pandemic, are compounding the crisis. The most impacted population are mainly displaced, refugees, returnees, host families, as well as female-headed households. WFP and FAO are urgently calling for interventions to be scaled up to support Congolese people in crisis areas. In addition to their emergency operations, the agencies are investing in resilience building projects that support community farming to boost yield, reduce losses, and spur access to markets. And going south to Mozambique today, the UN Refugee Agency says it continues to work around the clock to assist thousands of people in Cabo Delgado province. A recent attack by insurgents on the coastal town of Palma has forced at least 11,000 people to leave their homes, with thousands more reportedly trapped in the area. UNHCR says its teams in Pemba have received worrying reports that more than 1,000 displaced people were prevented from crossing the border into Tanzania. They're following up with those reports and have called on Mozambique's neighbors to provide access to territory and to asylum procedures for people escaping violence and seeking protection. The agency, also with its partners, has been distributing various relief items. The World Food Program, for its part, said today UN agencies are still struggling to access Palma. Both food assistance and evacuation flights remain suspended owing to the deteriorating security situation. We continue to appeal for access to the affected area and are working to pre-position food in neighboring districts of Montepuez and Mueda. WFP warned that hunger is continuing to rise in Palma as many people's livelihoods have been interrupted by the fighting. Some of those who arrived in Pemba from Palma have told WFP that they had not eaten for weeks. And moving on to our regular Covax update, today from Azerbaijan, Barbados, and Timor-Leste, which have all received COVID-19 vaccine doses with the help of UN teams on the ground. This morning, more than 33,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines landed in Barbados. Yesterday, Timor-Leste received 24,000 doses with several more batches on the way. They will target 20% of the population. The UN resident coordinator on the ground, Roy Trivedi, said that this is a historic moment, noting that this is the first shipment that is critical for ensuring first responders are not left behind the vaccination. And on Sunday, Azerbaijan received 84,000 doses, with more on the way, just with support of the UN and our partners. And staying on topic, the head of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore, stressed today that it is not enough COVID-19 vaccine supply to meet the demand, with available supplies concentrated in the hands of too few. She warned that some countries having an oversupply and having none of it at all, this threatens all of us. The virus, the mutations will win. Ms. Ford called for speed and simplicity to remove barriers to the acquisition, manufacturing, and distribution of vaccines globally. Her full statement is online. And lastly, today is the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace. In a message for the day, the Secretary General notes that sport is one of the great human pursuits, a model of teamwork, platform for individuals' excellence, and a driver for economic growth for all societies. He points out that COVID-19 pandemic has brought a new challenge to the world of sports and says that workers, fans, and athletes have felt the pain of absence. The lost revenue of dreams are deferred. The Secretary General notes that as vaccines spread hope and spectators begin to return to arenas, the world of sport has crucial contributions to make in forging a safe and sustainable recovery. He adds the UN looks forward to continuing to work with sports people and organizations around the world to advance climate action and to promote peace, human rights, and sustainable development. I will go to your questions before turning to Amy Quantrill from the PGA's office. And I do want to thank my colleagues at the UN Information Center in Washington for generously hosting me today. So let me go to the screen and see who's chatting, who's waving. Toby.
Thanks, Steph. Good afternoon. I have two quick questions today. The first is on the General Assembly High-Level Week later this year. I just want to know if there are any planning discussions about what's going to happen for that week in terms of pandemic response.
Sorry, for the week, I missed what you were saying.
For the High-Level Week in September.
First of all, the decision on how the high-level week will proceed will be a decision left to the member states, to the Office of the President or General Assembly. We will support them, guide them, and obviously offer advice on how to best move forward. There will also have to be, no doubt, a discussion with the host country authorities. All those words to say that it's too early for me to share any information with you.
And the second question is just Henrietta Fore, head of UNICEF, also had remarks today specifically about relaxing some intellectual property rights to get vaccine production ramped up to suitable levels. And considering that we've only had about 35 million doses delivered to the global population through Covax, does the SG have any revised guidance on what he wants in terms of waivers to get vaccines out there more quickly?
You know, I think the points that the executive director of UNICEF makes are the ones that reflect our position. There needs to be ways to simplify the process. Obviously, WTO is the body where the issue of patents will be discussed. But I think in the meantime, there needs to be stronger partnerships between the owners of the patents, the manufacturers, and all of the people involved in this supply chain to make the distribution faster and to obviously increase the volume. All right, James Bays. Sorry, is that you? Yes.
It is me.
Displaced by Edie.
No, I was late. I was late.
He was late.
Okay. I thought you'd be late. Right. Here's the question. With regard to the Nile and the talks that took place, I know that you were asked about this yesterday, but they certainly have now collapsed, those talks between Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan. And Egypt is certainly blaming, I quote, a lack of political will to negotiate in good faith from Ethiopia. And clearly Egypt had declared these the last chance talks. How worried is the Secretary-General about the situation, and how does he think diplomacy can be brought to bear on this issue?
Look, I think we can't underscore enough the importance of compromise and cooperation. I mean, we've taken note of the conclusion of the discussions in Kinshasa. We continue to urge the parties to continue with the efforts to take concrete steps towards reaching an agreement on the issue. Obviously, I think the efforts and the work, the initiatives of President Tshisekedi as the AU chairperson in reconvening the parties is to be welcomed. And we reiterate, we stand ready to support these efforts as guided by the parties. But I think the critical message is one of continued compromise and cooperation. And since we were not at the meeting, I can't, it's not for us to characterize the position of one or another.
Okay, one other question, if I can. And you were asked about this some weeks ago by Edie, and you said you would look into it and find out what was going on about it, but it's become a much bigger issue in the meantime, and that's the whole issue of vaccine passports. It's deeply controversial in many parts of the world, in Europe, here in the US. Now you've got the governor of Texas and the governor of Florida saying that they're banning the idea of vaccine passports. Who in the UN is looking at this? What is the UN's position on this? Because clearly it's not just a WHO issue. It's ICAO, it's economics, it's human rights. Is there someone who's addressing this? And is the UN in favor of vaccine passports?
Okay, I think the answer isn't as simple as the question. On one hand, having passports with vaccines, and in a sense, they already exist. I mean, so many of us have had little yellow books, passports with our yellow fever or other vaccines in it. So it is not a concept that is foreign to the world. I think we're looking at COVID on one hand, facilitating the resumption of travel, of trade is critical, and anything that would facilitate that would be welcome. On the other hand, there are issues of privacy, issues of inequity that also need to be looked at. So there's a lot of discussions going on, but the answer is not a simple one. I think what is important, though, is to try to depoliticize the issue and look at the privacy, the health, and obviously the economic benefits, and come up with a solution that doesn't make the issues of inequity and lack of privacy even worse.
So just explain for us, Steph, as a follow-up, who is doing this work in the UN? Who is trying to work out? Because it clearly is an issue where international standards are needed. Who is doing the work on this?
Exactly. I think there are a lot of discussions going on. The issue of public health, the global issue of public health, is one in the hands of WHO. Edie, sorry, I should have gone to you first. it's hard for me to see from where my vantage point.
That's fine. I know you were asked about this perhaps yesterday, but today in Vienna, the talks started between the United States and the other parties to the JCPOA, and I wonder whether the Secretary General has any message to that meeting.
You know, it's a meeting that we welcome. We welcome all of these efforts by the JCPOA participants to hold a constructive dialogue. We hope this is a first step in the right direction. We have always expressed our support for the JCPOA, which is an important multilateral agreement, and we hope that the agreement will get back on track. I think we're not. We fully understand that this will take time. There's a lot of work to be done, but we very much welcome the meeting in Vienna.
And I have one other question about North Korea. The DPRK has put out a statement refuting a UN expert's report saying that there is malnutrition among children in the DPRK. Does the Secretary General stand by that report? Do you have any comments?
Well, the report of two things on a broader issue. The reports of panel of experts are reports of the panel of experts to the Security Council. They are not signed by the Secretary General in any way. So, and that's for any of them. They're an important tool. What we do know is that there are issues, very serious humanitarian issues in the DPRK, and through our country team and with our humanitarian partners, we will do our best to address them. Okay, who's that? Benno.
Thank you. So a little follow-up to Covax. U.S. Foreign Minister Blinken said yesterday that the United States wants to share more vaccine doses with the world soon. Is there any talks with the United Nations to channel that through the UN system?
We will have to check with our colleagues who manage the Covax facility. But obviously, we welcome any move by countries that have vaccines to share vaccines. I think it's a very important step forward. Okay, who is that in the room? Stefano, is that you? Go ahead. Yes.
You don't recognize me.
I need your microphone.
Okay. Thank you so much.
We're far from each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But you know, your name is my name, so you should remember that.
There are many days when I remember my own name. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. So the Italian Prime Minister visited Libya today, Tripoli. And during the press conference with the Libyan Premier, he praised Libya for its policy with migrants, say that it was doing practically a good job. So my question is, does the Secretary General think that Libya is doing a good job with migrants, or should improve something, especially when it to do with those camps that looks like lager? Thank you.
I'm not going to comment on the Prime Minister's position. I think our issues with the way that migrants have been treated in the Mediterranean, have been treated in Libya and other countries are clear and unchanged. And I think I will let you do the compare and contrast. Okay, let's go to Rick and then Iftikhar.
Thank you, Stéphane. I had a landmine question, question about landmines. The Biden administration said that it was going to end the Trump administration's policy on landmine use. He called it deeply misguided. Today, we learned from the Defense Department that policy of use of landmine use remains in effect. And so I wondered if you or a colleague from the Mine Action Service could comment on that, what appears to be a surprise.
Let me get back to you on that, because I'm not. It's a level of granularity which I have to check with our colleagues, but we'll get some comments from you very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Iftikhar, and then Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph. Now that Jordan's royal family has settled the problem, according to the news reports, does the Secretary General have any comments, since he had voiced grave concern over the situation in Jordan?
I mean, what I know is what you know. We've seen the press reports, and if they are indeed true, it is a welcome development. Abdelhamid Sayam.
Thank you, Stéphane. This morning in the village of Bir Nabala, north of Jerusalem, an Israeli checkpoint stopped the car of Osama Muhammad Mansour and his wife. He was cleared, they let him go, and they immediately fired at him, killing him immediately and wounding his wife. How long the Palestinian going to be killed and the UN going to keep just mentioning these numbers in a monthly report? Why there is no statement on this extrajudicial killing?
I will check with the special coordinator if they've issued anything, but I can tell you that we report regularly on the violence that we see in the occupied Palestinian territory.
My second question, Stéphane, about how much Covax had offered the Palestinian of vaccine. Do you have any numbers?
How much they've received?
Yeah, how much the Gazans and the Palestinian in general received from Covax?
We had an update a few weeks ago. I'll get you those numbers this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Ibtisam.
Hi, Steph. I have a follow-up on the landmine issue. So the U.S. is not, so far didn't sign the Ottawa Convention. Do you have, and other countries, not only the U.S., other very important countries that that should be signing? Do you have any comment or any message to the U.S. but to other countries who didn't sign?
Message to those who haven't signed it is sign it. I think the violence that is and the destruction brought about from landmines is clear for all to see. The money that is spent clearing them, the damage that is done in the damage that is left behind by landmines that are left behind, the children that are killed, the land that is not used, cannot be used because landmines continue to be there. Our stance against landmines has been very clear and will remain so.
I have another question, but I'm not sure if you, on the same subject. So when the Trump administration last year, when they lifted the restriction on the deployment of anti-personnel landmines, is there anybody from the UN who is, or one of the UN bodies who is monitoring how this affected things on the ground, whether selling or deploying landmines?
I think that those are questions we'll check with our Mine Action Service and Disarmament Affairs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Amy, welcome. Happy Tuesday. And I will be back in the room tomorrow to see you all.